The sand was wrong. Aya had lived on Vethkaras for 3 years, long enough to know every mood the desert made, the way it hissed before a subsurface current, the way it went perfectly still in the hour before a tortoise broke the surface. And this was none of those moods. The sand 200 meters north of the salvage rig was just wrong. It sat too still, it pressed down too flat, like something had punched it from underneath, and it hadn't decided yet whether to forgive that. She pushed her goggles up and squinted. Biko, I see it. Biko was already at the rig's instrument panel, her long fingers dancing across the pressure sensors without looking at them, which she only did when she was genuinely worried. Biko performed calm the way other people performed confidence, by doing everything with surgical precision as if the universe would notice and behave accordingly. It never did, but Aya appreciated the theory. That's not a tortoise, Aya said. No. Pressure reading says it's about 60 meters long. I know. The biggest tortoise on the registered scale is 18. I'm aware. Aya picked up her wrench, not because it would help with something 60 meters long, but because her hands needed something in them when she was thinking. The wrench was a good 30-centimeter piece of industrial steel, and it had gotten her through 4 years of bounty work before Vethkaras. It had on one notable occasion convinced a very large and very rude Kilhari debt collector that his business was elsewhere. She trusted it. Sub-sand cruiser, Biko said quietly. Aya lowered the wrench. Pirates, most likely. They looked at each other across the rig platform, the kind of look you only develop with someone you've argued with for 6 years and nearly died with for 3. Compact and dense with meaning, the way old rope gets when you coil it tight enough. How much do we owe on the rig? Aya asked. 42,000 galactic standard. And our total liquid assets, counting the 3 tortoises in the hold, counting them, negative 12,000. Aya turned back to the sand. So running isn't really a financial option. Not really. Okay. She turned the wrench over in her hands. Okay, here's what we do. The sub-sand cruiser broke surface 2 minutes later, and it broke surface badly. One of its drive vanes had been sheared off, and the whole vessel came up at a 30-degree list, shedding sand in great yellow curtains. It was a Harkin-class raider, maybe 15 years old, military surplus that had been stripped and reconfigured so many times it barely remembered being military. Someone had painted a mouth on its bow. The teeth were very good. Whoever did them had real talent, and the eyes above them had been done with less skill but more enthusiasm. A hatch blew open. A girl fell out. She hit the sand about 3 meters from the base of the rig and bounced, which surprised Aya considerably. Most people didn't bounce. This one did. Twice, before settling into a sitting position with her legs out in front of her and her dark hair, covering most of her face, and her arms wrapped around something small and round that she was clutching to her chest. Then she looked up. She had the largest, most earnest, most unconditionally delighted eyes Aya had ever seen on a human face. They were deep brown and currently full of tears and wonder simultaneously, which was a combination Aya hadn't encountered since she was about 11 years old. Aya, the girl screamed. Aya had never seen her before in her life. Oh no, Biko said very quietly from behind her. 2 men dropped from the cruiser's hatch and hit the sand running. The first was broad across the chest with a scar running from his left ear to his chin and weapons enough strapped to him that he jangled when he moved. The second was smaller and faster, and wearing the expression of someone who had been doing something unpleasant for a long time, and had made their peace with it. The girl scrambled to her feet, still clutching her round object, and ran directly at Aya with both arms open. Aya caught her purely by reflex. She had good reflexes, always had, since she was old enough to realize she was harder to hurt than most people, and had calibrated her instincts accordingly. And the girl hit her like a small freight train full of gratitude. I knew you'd be here, the girl said, muffled against Aya's shoulder. I knew it, I knew it, I knew it. I absolutely wasn't anywhere in particular, Aya said. We're in the middle of a desert. Koto, the scarred man shouted. Back away from those two right now. The girl, Koto, apparently turned around without letting go of Aya and put herself behind Aya's arm. Not hiding, using it as a podium. I'm not going with you, Grash, she said, with a composure that didn't match the tears at all. Not until you explain what the ritual is for. I have a right to know. My mother would have wanted. Your mother is dead, Grash said, and the master's plan requires the vessel, and the vessel's cooperations is optional. Aya felt the girl's grip tighten on her arm. There was a specific thing that happened in Aya's chest when someone said something to a scared person that was designed to make them more scared. It wasn't anger exactly. It was more like an equation resolving. Like something clicked into a settled position and all the math pointed in one direction. She moved between the girl and the 2 men. Here's the situation, Aya said pleasantly. Your ship's missing a drive vane, which means it's not going anywhere without repair. I'm the only qualified mechanic within about 200 kilometers of here. So if you want this girl, you're going to have to deal with me first. And dealing with me is complicated. How complicated? The smaller man said. Aya hit him with the wrench. It was a very efficient hit. She had years of practice, and he sat down in the sand and stayed there. The scarred man, Grash, pulled a weapon that looked serious and pointed it at her face, and Aya looked at it with the expression of someone who had done enough, reading on her own biology, to know that the category of weapons that could actually do meaningful damage to her was narrower than most people assumed. Put the girl on the rig, she told Biko. Already on it, Biko said from somewhere above her. Shoot her, Grash said to someone behind Aya. Aya turned around. There were 4 more of them, dropped from the cruiser's side hatches, all pointing things at her. The things ranged from pulse weapons to what looked like a jury-rigged particle scatter, which was genuinely dangerous, at least theoretically. Okay, Aya said. Let's talk about what happens next. What happened next was, in fact, complicated. Biko had always been the planner. Ah had always been the force. This arrangement had developed organically over 6 years of working together, which was how most good arrangements developed. Not through discussion, but through the quiet accumulation of evidence about what worked. Biko was smarter than almost anyone she'd ever met. Aya was harder to stop than almost anything she'd ever encountered. These were facts, not opinions, and the two of them had learned to treat them as engineering constraints rather than personality traits. What Biko had done while Aya was absorbing fire from 6 pirate crew members, and absorbing was approximately the right word, since the pulse weapons left burns that healed while she was walking off them, and the scatterblast knocked her down, but she got back up before anyone had properly processed that she was supposed to stay down, was repurpose the subsurface sonar into an inductive pulse emitter and detonate it in a tight cone aimed at the cruiser's exposed power couplings. The cruiser's external systems went dark. The pirates found themselves standing in a desert with no working ship, no communications, and a very battered but functional bounty hunter who had just gotten back to her feet for the 3rd time and was expressing mild irritation. The girl, Aya said, walk away from the ship. You can have water. You cannot have her. Grash looked at her. He was, Aya thought, a man who had made his living through intimidation and violence and had correctly calculated that these tools worked against most things. He was recalculating now. She could see him doing it, his eyes moving over the burns on her arms that were already fading, over the posture of someone who had never quite learned to look like she'd been beaten even when she had. The master will come for her, he said finally. That's the master's problem, Aya said. He walked away. They all walked away into the desert in the direction of the emergency beacon they'd activated. Aya watched them go. Then she climbed up to the rig platform and looked at Biko and the girl. Biko was looking at the girl the way she looked at things she had not planned for and was not sure how to classify. Biko liked to classify things. It settled her. The girl, Koto, was sitting on a supply crate eating a ration bar with the focused appreciation of someone who had been hungry for a while. She had put her round object down next to her, and Aya could see it was a small sphere of some dark material, slightly iridescent, the size of a large grapefruit. So, Aya said. Koto looked up. The earnestness was still there, undimmed, which was impressive given what she'd apparently just been through. I can pay you, she said. My father has a lot of money. Who is your father? Kotobuki. Kotobuki Sr. He runs the Kotobuki Financial Group. Biko made a very small sound. The conglomerate, Aya said. Yes, that Kotobuki. There's only one. Biko made the sound again, and this time Aya recognized it as the sound Biko made when a calculation resolved significantly in their favor. It was one of her favorite sounds. How much of a reward? Aya said carefully. Are we talking about? Koto told them. They listened. Even the sand seemed to listen, then went very still, as if it too was trying to absorb the number. Biko put her hands together on the instrument panel in a gesture that was, for her, approximately equivalent to a standing ovation. Okay, Aya said. Koto, you can stay for now, but I need to know everything. About Grash, about the master, about what this ritual is, and about what that sphere is. Koto looked at the sphere, and for the first time since landing in the sand, her expression changed. Not the tears, not the wonder, those were still there, but something else. Something older than she looked. His name is Gale, she said, and the sphere belonged to my mother. She died to keep it out of his hands, and I don't entirely understand why yet, but I know she was right. That night, with the desert cooling to something almost pleasant and the 3 tortoises shifting quietly in the hold below, Koto told them what she knew. Her mother had been a researcher with the Galactic Preservation Council. one of the small and underfunded organizations that cataloged threats to what they tactfully called universal continuity, which was the polite term for the continued existence of reality as currently configured. 3 years ago, her mother had gone dark. 2 years ago, the council had quietly informed Kotobuki Sr. that she had died in the field, cause undisclosed. 1 year ago, a package had arrived for Koto, with no return address, containing the sphere and a note written in her mother's handwriting. The note said, "Don't let them have this. It is the lock, and without the lock, the door opens inward, and what comes through won't stop." Koto had been trying to understand what that meant for a year when Grash's people had taken her from her father's orbital station. "Did you figure it out?" Biko asked. She had her personal tablet out and was taking notes, because Biko took notes on everything, a habit that Aya had once found annoying and now considered deeply reassuring. "Some of it," Koso said. "Gale runs a cult. He calls it the Order of Purification. He thinks Lady Xena, she was a sorceress from the old empire, thousands of years ago, he thinks she wants to purify the universe. He thinks she'll come through and fix everything that's wrong. He's been looking for the right body to channel her spirit into. And he thinks you're it," Aya said. "My mother apparently had a specific biological signature. I inherited it. The sphere is supposedly the last remaining key to the ritual chamber on Suva Station. If he uses me as a host and completes the ritual with the sphere, the way opens. For the sorceress," Biko said. "For Xena, yes." Except Koto stopped. She picked up the sphere and held it, and in the desert dark it seemed to pulse very faintly, like something breathing. "Except my mother's notes say Xena doesn't want to purify the universe. She never did. Gale has spent his whole life devoted to something that is going to destroy everything including him. Xena wants to unmake all of it. Every dimension, every timeline, every parallel universes, and build something new in the wreckage that she rules absolutely." The desert was quiet. "She's been dead for thousands of years," Aya said. "Yes, but she's been waiting. She's been patient." Koto looked up at her. "She has a lot of time." Aya sat with that for a moment. She thought about the scale of it. The patience required to wait thousands of years for the right moment, the right vessel, the right fool to do your bidding. And she thought it was either the most alien thing she'd ever contemplated, or the most human, and she wasn't sure which was worse. "Okay," she said. "So we need to not let Gale have you. That would be ideal, yes. And we need to keep the sphere out of his hands. Also, yes. And ideally, we stop whatever ritual he's planning." Koto nodded. Aya looked at Biko. Biko had stopped writing notes and was looking at the numbers on her screen, with the expression she made when math was actively upsetting her. "The reward money?" Aya asked. "It's real," Baiso said. "I verified the account. It's real, and it is, I have to say, a number I have not seen before in a professional context." She paused. "Getting her home alive is worth more than everything we owe on this rig, the equipment, and arguably our current planet of residence combined." "So we're doing this," Aya said. "We were always doing this," Biko said. "You hit the man with a wrench before we knew about the money. That was reflexive." "I know." Biko looked at her with an expression that was not quite a smile, but was something in the neighborhood. "It usually is with you." They didn't sleep much. Aya spent most of the dark hours doing what she'd always done when she couldn't sleep, which was work on whatever machine needed the most attention and was in the worst shape. Tonight, that was the rig's secondary sonar, which Biko had modified so aggressively that half its original functions were gone. While she worked, her hands finding the familiar geometries of circuitry in the dark, she thought about the girl inside, and the sphere and the dead sorceress waiting, somewhere in the architecture of the universe, with geological patience. She thought about her mother, who had died keeping a lock out of the wrong hands and managed to send the lock home first. She thought about the wrench in her belt, which had belonged to her father, who had been a maintenance tech on a generation ship and had impressed upon her from early childhood that you could fix anything if you understood well enough, and that the most important tool was always the one in your hand right now. Biko came out around the third hour and sat beside her. "There's something else," Biko said. "I assumed. Someone found us." Biko laid a small device on the metal plate between them. It was a comm unit, compact and expensive. Left it on the ramp. "Someone was out here while we were inside talking and just left it there and walked away." Aya looked at it. "Galactic Police. The frequency it's broadcasting on is registered to the Galactic Patrol, yes. The authentication codes are 2 years out of date, but the encryption layer is current. Someone who used to be official and isn't anymore, or someone who doesn't have access to the latest credentials, or someone who's the last one left," Aya said. They turned on the comm unit. The voice that came out was small, not in volume, but in the way that voices get small when they are coming from something that is small. high and slightly nasal, and carrying beneath it an exhaustion so absolute it had worn smooth like stones in a river. "My name is Marutan," the voice said. "I am a Class 7 agent with the Galactic Patrol. Or I was. There are not many of us left. Xena's servants killed most of my unit 18 months ago on Sova Station while we were attempting to secure the ritual chamber. I have been tracking Gale's organization since then." A pause. "I know who you are. I know what you have. I know what Gale intends. I need your help. I can offer you information and certain resources. I am told you can be motivated by financial considerations." "He's been doing surveillance on us," Biko said flatly. "Apparently. I find that irritating." "Me too." Aya picked up the comm unit. "Where are you?" 40 meters northeast of your ramp. I have been attempting to decide whether to approach directly for approximately 6 hours. I am not very large, and bounty hunters have occasionally tried to collect on me for reasons that are a long story and not germane to the current situation. Aya and Biko looked at each other. "Come in," Aya said. He was, in fact, not very large. He was approximately the height of a 10-year-old human child and built like something that had evolved specifically to be underestimated. Soft eyes, a face that looked like it had been designed for cuteness, and then weathered by decades of genuine difficulty, a uniform that had once been the sky blue of the Galactic Patrol and was now mostly the gray-brown of dried blood and long-distance travel. He carried no visible weapons, which Biko had noted as either very honest or very sophisticated. He stood at the base of the ramp and looked up at them. "I will be brief," Merton said. "Gale's flagship, the Ashen Prophet, is in system. He came personally when he lost contact with Grash. He will reach this position in approximately 9 hours. His ship carries 16 combat-grade drones, a particle lance, a crew of 42, and the collected resources of a 12-year operations specifically designed to prepare for this ritual. He also carries, on the Prophet's lower deck, the summoning apparatus required to complete the channeling, the machine that opens the vessel to Xena's spirit. And without the sphere," Biko said, "without the sphere, the machine cannot be calibrated. The sphere contains the resonant signature of the ritual site on Sova Station. It acts as a tuning key for the apparatus." He paused. "Your young guest is the only living person whose biological profile matches the vessel. Requirements: destroy the sphere, and you eliminate 2 of the 3 required components. However, Aya said, destroying the sphere requires a focused dissonance frequency that I can generate, but only at close range. Additionally, Gale has made contingency preparations. He has obtained, through means I have not fully traced, a partial resonance template derived from the original ritual site. It is less precise. It requires a specific configuration of stellar bodies that will only occur once, in the Talho sector, in approximately 48 standard hours. If he cannot use your guest and this sphere, he will seek an alternate vessel and attempt to force the ritual with the partial template. It will be unstable, catastrophically unstable." "How catastrophic?" Biko said. Marutan's soft eyes went to the dark horizon. "He will unmake 3 adjacent sectors trying to get it right. Billions of lives. And Xena, if she manages to manifest, will unmake considerably more. My best estimate, based on the models we built before the Sova Station engagement, is that an uncontrolled manifestation gives the universe as currently configured a survival probability of approximately 11%. Silence. The desert was very quiet. 11%, Aya said. "Yes, those aren't great odds, no." She thought about it. She was good at thinking about things quickly, had always been, had needed to be, because in her experience the gap between thinking and acting needed to be short, or the window closed. She thought about Kodo's mother, and the lock, and the note in the dead woman's handwriting. She thought about Grash walking away across the sand. She thought about Biko's numbers on the screen, and the rig's outstanding debt, and the 3 tortoises in the hold who were going to have a very strange day tomorrow. She thought about 11%. "What do we need to do?" she said. Marutan looked at her. Something shifted in those tired eyes. Not hope, exactly, because he'd been doing this too long for hope to survive intact, but something that remembered what hope had felt like. "We need to board Gale's ship," he said. "Secure your guest. Destroy the summoning apparatus. Neutralize Gale before he reaches the Talho sector." "Simple," Biko said, with the particular flatness that meant the opposite. "I didn't say simple. I said necessary." Marutan paused. "I should also tell you that I cannot do this alone because I am 4.7 centimeters shorter than the ship's interior access panels, and the crawl spaces require a minimum reach that I do not possess." "You came to us because you need someone with long arms," Aya said. "I came to you because you hit a man twice your size with a wrench and then stood up from a particle scatterblast and looked annoyed. And also, yes, the reach." Biko made her calculations sound again. There's a reward for stopping this too, Marutin added. Galactic Patrol Emergency Preservation Fund. It is. He named a number. Biko made a different sound entirely. It is my duty, Aya said, and found herself meaning both things at once. They had 9 hours. Biko spent the first 3 of them doing what she did best, which was building something out of the worst materials available in the shortest time possible. The rig's secondary skimmer, the one they used for specimen retrieval, was designed for a crew of 2 at a maximum speed of about 80 kilometers an hour. Biko stripped the tortoise restraint systems, rerouted the power from the sonar equipment, cantilevered the engine housing forward for better thrust distribution, and bolted on the particle scatter from the pirates' abandoned equipment. She worked through the night with 3 lamps and her tablet, and the particular silence of concentration that Aya had learned, over 6 years, to treat as sacred. Aya spent that time with Kodo. They sat on the supply crates and drank bad coffee, and the girl talked about her mother, which was clearly what she needed to do, and Aya listens, which was clearly what she needed to provide. She was not, historically, a good listener. She was better at moving and fixing and occasionally hitting things. But she had learned that listening was itself a form of work, and she tried to do it with the same attention she gave to engines. Koto's mother had been a small, precise woman who laughed rarely, but well, who had taught her daughter to read resonance signatures at age 8 and orbital mechanics at 10, and the basic principles of universal topology at 12, who had held the sphere up to the light when Kodo was 6 and told her it was the most important lock in existence, which Kodo had accepted without question because her mother said it seriously. She knew, Kodo said, that last year. She knew something was closing in. She didn't tell me because she thought she could fix it. She did fix it, Aya said. She got the lock out. She got you out. You got both of them here. Kodo looked at the sphere. I'm scared. Yes, Aya said. That's appropriate. You're not scared. Aya considered this. I'm scared of things I can't fix, she said. Things I can fix, I just get to work. She picked up the wrench, turned it over. My father used to say the universe is basically machines. Everything is machines. And machines break, and that's okay, because machines can be repaired. You just have to understand them well enough. What if it's too complicated? Then you understand it better. Aya shrugged. That's the whole job. That's all it ever is. Kodo was quiet for a while. Then, what if Xena is already inside me? What if she's been listening? What if Gale is right and the connection is already there? Aya looked at her. The earnest eyes, currently serious in a way that made her look much older. The way she held the sphere like a thing her mother had given her, which is what it was. Then she's heard everything, Aya said. She's heard a 19-year-old girl who loves her dead mother and is scared and is doing it anyway. She can keep listening, doesn't change what we're doing. Kodo took a long breath. Okay. In the 4th hour, Biko called them both out to look at the skimmer. It was, by any objective standard, an impressive piece of work. It was also deeply alarming to look at in the way that things are alarming when they are clearly faster and more dangerous than their original design ever intended. Biko had a gift for this. She had always had a gift for this. Aya had once, memorably, compared her to the universe's most overdetermined engineer. Someone who looked at a problem and saw not what was needed but what was possible, and built to the possible even when the needed would have been safer. Top speed is now approximately 400 kilometers an hour, Biko said. The particle scatter has been reconfigured for point defense. The forward hull plate is reinforced with the tortoise cadge alloy, which is rated for sustained pulse fire. She paused. I also fabricated a door breacher from the rig's compression drill. If we need to get into a ship fast, we can. Marutin walked around the skimmer twice, examining it, and then looked up at Biko with an expression of undisguised admiration. In one night, he said. I work better under pressure, Biko said. How much better? This is about average. He stared at her. I have access to the Galactic Patrol's full engineering division. I know. You have more tools. I have better reasoning. She said it without pride or hostility, as a statement of operational fact, and Aya loved her for it, in the specific way that you love someone who has been exactly themselves for 6 uninterrupted years. The Ashener Prophet came in at hour 7. It was big, not the biggest ship Aya had ever seen, but big in a way that communicated intent, the way that certain people are big in a way that communicates intent. It was painted gray-black with the order's symbol on the bow, a stylized flame that ate itself, and it moved through the upper atmosphere with the assurance of something that had never encountered meaningful resistance. Aya watched it through the rangefinder and felt the equation resolve in her chest again. He'll send drones first, Marutin said, to locate us. Then he'll send a boarding party. He'll want to recover your guest intact, which limits his use of heavy weapons. He'll also want the sphere, Biko said, which means he doesn't want to risk a precision strike. Correct. So we have a window, Aya said. We have a window, Biko agreed. Tell me about the ship's layout. Marutan pulled a worn data chip from his uniform and slotted it into Biko's tablet. Floor plans appeared, technical schematics, the kind of document that cost lives to obtain. The summoning apparatus is here. Deck 7, midship, in what used to be a cargo bay. The crew quarters are on decks 3 and 4. Gale's private section is here at the bow, behind a security partition. The apparatus requires a minimum of 3 operators to run, at a minimum. So if we can get to the apparatus, Biko said, and either destroy it or take it offline, Marutan said. While keeping Koto away from Gale, Aya added, and neutralizing the drones, Biko said. And getting back out, Koto said, from behind them. They all looked at her. She had her arms crossed, and the sphere tucked under one arm, and the look on her face of someone who was done being cargo and had decided to participate. I have an idea about the apparatus, Koto said. The sphere is a tuning key. My mother built it. If I can get to the apparatus while it's offline, I can use the sphere to permanently alter its calibration. Not just shut it down. Wreck it. Make it so it can never lock onto the ritual site resonance again. Marutan stared at her. Do you know enough? My mother taught me how it works when I was 12. She said it was important that I understand it. Koto's voice was steady. I think she was preparing me, in case something happened. The desert was very quiet for a moment. Your mother sounds like she was remarkable, Biko said. She was the best person I ever knew, Koto said, simply. She would have fixed this herself if she could, so I'm going to fix it for her. Aya looked at this girl, 19 years old, raised on orbital stations and research ships, clutching her dead mother's final gift, ready to walk into the flagship of the man who killed her mother's work and had spent years trying to use her as a vessel for something ancient and terrible, and felt something that she normally avoided examining too closely because it complicated the math. She felt proud of her, which made no sense. They'd known each other for about 8 hours. It made no sense at all, and she felt it completely. Okay, Aya said. Here's the plan. The drones came in at hour 7 and 40 minutes. There were 6 of them, fast and disc-shaped, operating in a search pattern that covered the surface in overlapping arcs. Aya watched them from inside the rig's shadow and waited. The waiting was the hard part. It was always the hard part. But she had learned patience the same way she'd learned most things, by doing the thing that felt wrong until it felt right. The pattern had a gap every 90 seconds, a 4-second window when 3 of the 6 drones were in a configuration where their sensor overlaps created a blind spot about 30 meters across. Marutan had identified it. Biko had timed it. 90 seconds, 4 seconds, 90 seconds, 4 seconds. In the first window, the skimmer moved. Biko drove, and she drove well. She had the same gift for vehicles that she had for everything mechanical, the ability to feel what a machine wanted to do, and help it do that thing slightly faster than physics alone would allow. The skimmer accelerated through the gap at about 200 kilometers an hour, which was fast enough that the dust trail was already settling. Before the nearest drone completed its arc, they made it to the Prophet's shadow. The ship was enormous from underneath, a cliff face of gray-black metal, the drive system cycling in a low hum that Aya felt in her back teeth. She could see the maintenance hatches in the undercarriage. She could see, 2/3 of the way toward the bow, the one that Marutan's schematic had marked as emergency access to Deck 7. 30 meters and rising, Biko said. They haven't deployed the boarding party yet. They're still in search pattern. They'll go active when they find the empty rig, Aya said. About 4 minutes. 4 minutes. Aya took the compression drill and looked at the hatch. Koto, she said, stay between Biko and the ship. Marutan, you're with me. I am significantly shorter. I'll lift you. Let's go. The drill breached the hatch in 40 seconds, which was faster than she'd expected. The alloy was heavy grade, but she had the angles right, which mattered more than force, her father would have said. Behind the hatch was a maintenance shaft that led, according to the schematic, to Deck 7's port access corridor. She went in first, Marutan went after her, and she did, in fact, lift him over the lip, which he accepted with the dignity of someone who had made their peace with the practical indignities of his situation. Behind them, she heard the skimmer settle onto the undercarriage and the ramp go down. Biko, she said into the comm, talk to me. Security systems on Deck 7 are, there's a 3-second delay in the motion sensors. Someone wired them with commercial-grade updates instead of military spec. Whoever maintains their ship systems is not very good. Can you loop them? Already am. You have a corridor. The corridor was dark and smelled of recycled air and old metal and the particular chemical sweetness of industrial cleaning agents that were doing their best with too little. Aya moved quickly. Marutin behind her, her eyes adjusting. The schematic said Cargo Bay 7 Delta was 110 meters bowward. The hum of the drive systems was louder here, vibrating in the deck plates, and underneath it she could hear something else. A deeper tone, not mechanical, something that had no business being in a ship's interior. The summoning apparatus. It was running. They started it early, Marutin said. Very quietly. Can they complete it without Koto? Not properly. But they may be warming it to resonance, preparing it for when they have her. The process has a preheating phase. How long before it's dangerous? At current output, he checked something on his wrist unit. 14 minutes before it reaches the threshold that starts affecting the surrounding space-time. After that, the destabilization begins even without the vessel. Biko, change of plan. We need to move faster, I heard. I'm cutting through the maintenance access to the crew corridor now. The security partition on Gale's section it's actually a standard Harken. Class lock. I can get through it in about 6 minutes. Do it, Kodo. Stay with Biko. I'm here, Kodo said. She sounded steady. Steadier than Aya would have expected. I'm ready. Good. The door to Cargo Bay 7 Delta was locked with a biometric seal that would have taken Biko about 30 seconds, and would take Aya approximately the time required to hit it very hard with the compression drill's mounting bracket. She chose the second option because she had 14 minutes, and the first didn't feel urgent enough. The door came apart. The apparatus was, but to Aya's eye, a beautiful piece of engineering in the way that terrible things sometimes were. It occupied most of the bay, a series of nested rings, each about 2 meters in diameter, arranged in concentric layers around a central chamber that pulsed with a light that was not quite any color she had a name for. There were consoles, 3 of them, manned by 3 robed technicians who turned at the sound of the door and stared at her. The deep tone was louder here. It was the sound of something ancient being woken. Step away from the consoles, Aya said. They didn't move. One of them said something in a language she didn't know, which had the rhythm of an order. The other 2 pulled weapons. Marutin moved with a speed that was genuinely surprising for his size. He had spent the last 18 months hunting the people who killed his unit, and he had learned things about violence that his training hadn't covered. The first weapon went into the wall. The second went into the ceiling. The first technician, the one who had given the order, backed toward the central console and started typing. Don't. Marutin started. Aya crossed the bay in 3 steps and took the console. She did not particularly know what she was doing with the console. But she knew machines. She knew them the way her father had taught her, from the inside out, from the principle to the application. She looked at the console, and she looked at the nested rings, and she thought about what the deep tone was doing, and what it would need to do to not do that. She found the resonance stabilizer, and she hit it. The apparatus shuddered. The color that wasn't a color flickered. That's the preheating sequence, Marutin said behind her. If you disrupt it during this it resets, right? Theoretically. Does it reset? In 6 of the 7 documented instances, yes. What happened in the 7th? The station it was located on no longer exists. What were the differences in the 7th case? The operator was, he paused, using a different stabilizer configuration. This one? He looked at the console. No, a SOVA mark configuration. This is a Harkon mark. Then it resets, Aya said, and hit it again. The deep tone stopped. The nested rings slowed. The color that wasn't a color faded to gray, then to nothing. The bay was quiet except for the ordinary sounds of a ship running its systems. 14 minutes reduced to 0, Aya said. Where's Gale? Bow section, Marutin said. Biko should be through the security partition by now. Biko. Static. Then Biko's voice very level. I'm through. I'm in Gale's section. Gale is here. He has approximately 8 armed crew with him, and he has a pause. He has Kodo. Aya was already moving. The corridor between Deck 7 and the bow section was long, and it had crew in it. Alarmed crew who had heard the apparatus go offline and the door to 7 Delta come apart, and were now moving toward the sound. She didn't stop. She went through them the way she went through most things, which was straight ahead at a speed that made hesitation irrelevant, and they moved because people generally moved when someone was moving that way. The security partition had a neat circular hole in it where Biko had applied the drill. Aya went through the hole. Gale's personal section was large and decorated with the kind of aesthetic that meant someone believed very deeply in their own significance. The Order's flame symbol was everywhere. There were screens displaying what looked like stellar cartography. She recognized the Talho sector on 2 of them. There were relics in cases, things that had the look of genuine antiquity rather than purchased age. And there was Gegale. He was tall, which she hadn't expected from the file descriptions. Silver-haired, dressed in gray, with a face that had been handsome once, and currently wore the expression of a man whose plans were not going the way he had arranged them. He was holding Koto's arm, not roughly, more in the manner of someone holding something valuable, and behind him stood his 8 armed crew members. And Biko, who was standing with her hands up but had the expression of someone whose hands being up was a temporary state of affairs she had already calculated the end of. The sphere was on the table beside Gale. "You disabled my apparatus," Gale said. He said it the way people say things when they're trying to assess damage before reacting to it. "I did," Aya said. That took significant understanding of the system. "My father taught me that everything is machines," Aya said, "and machines can always be disrupted if you understand them." Gale looked at her. He had intelligent eyes, which was the worst kind of true believer, the ones who were smart enough to rationalize everything, and had spent years doing exactly that. "You don't understand what you've done. The purification. The purification is a lie," Kodo said. "Xena doesn't want to purify anything. She wants to unmake everything. You've spent your whole life on a lie." Gale's grip on her arm tightened very slightly. "You've been told." "I've read my mother's research," Kodo said. "The original research, not your version of it. She spent years documenting Xena's actual communications from the ritual sites. Every single transmission is about annihilation, not purification. Gale, she was using you. She used the whole order. She told you what you needed to hear so you would do what she needed done." The room was very quiet. Aya watched Gale's face. She watched him process what Kodo had just said with the specific expression of a man whose fundamental architecture is encountering a load it was not designed for. She had seen that expression before, not often, but memorably. It was the expression of a person discovering that the story they had built their life around was built on sand. "That's not," he started. "It is," Kodo said. "My mother died proving it, and I will show you the documentation if you let me, because I think part of you already knows. Part of you has always known. The voice that told you it was purification, how did it feel? Did it feel holy?" Gale said nothing. "Or did it feel like hunger?" Kodo said quietly. "Ancient hunger that called itself holy because you needed it to." The silence stretched. Aya kept her eyes on the 8 armed crew members, tracking their positions, calculating angles, doing the thing she did when the math needed to stay ahead of the situation. She saw Byako's hands drop to her sides, very slowly. She saw Maruten come through the hole in the partition behind her, and she saw Gale's face change. Not break, not collapse. Change the way weather changes, the way very old, very large things change when something finally shifts at the foundation. He had spent 12 years building an apparatus to wake a dead goddess, and what he had actually built, the real structure of his life, was a 12-year lie to himself that he could finally, standing here in his gray-painted bow section, with the Talho sector on his screens and a girl telling him the truth that he had been circling for years, no longer maintain. He let go of Kodo's arm. His 8 crew members looked at him, and then at each other, with the specific uncertainty of people whose certainty was upstream of their employers. "The apparatus is offline," Aya said. "Permanently, if she does what she said." She looked at Kodo. Kodo picked up the sphere from the table. She looked at Gale. "I'm going to use this to permanently recalibrate it," she said. "Not just shut it down. Eliminate the resonance signature entirely. Even if someone rebuilds the apparatus, they won't be able to use it for this. Ever." She paused. "But I want you to understand why. Not because you lost. Because she lied to you. Because my mother spent years trying to find a way to tell people the truth before she died, and this is the last thing she could give me that might make it matter." Gale sat down heavily in his chair. He looked very old suddenly, and very tired, and very much like a man who had just been handed the truth at a cost he hadn't planned to pay. "Show me," he said quietly. "The documentation, show me." Kodo looked at Aya. Aya shrugged. "We have 48 hours before the Talho window closes anyway. Show him." The next 6 hours were strange. Kodo showed Gale her mother's research files, which she had memorized, and could also access from the sphere's secondary memory storage, which turned out to be more than a lock. It was a complete archive of her mother's work. Biko sat beside her and provided technical context with the methodical precision of someone who had been in enough complicated situations to understand that sometimes the most important thing you could do was be clear about what the evidence showed. Maruten sat in a corner of the bow section and watched everything with his tired, patient eyes. The crew stood down gradually, the way crews do when the person they're following changes direction. Not all at once, but in small groups, by 3s and 4s, as the weight of what was happening reached them. Aya walked the ship. She had always done this when she needed to think, found the machine, and walked it, learned its rhythms, understood what it wanted to do and what it was being asked to do. The Ashen Prophet was 12 years old and had been worked hard. and maintained well by someone who cared. Underneath the ideological paint job, she found small things, a compensator that needed adjustment on the port drive, a coolant line with a slow leak, a secondary navigation array that was running on a firmware version 3 generations out of date. She fixed them, one by one, with the tools in the maintenance locker on Deck 4, working in the ship's quiet dark. It was, she thought, the most honest thing she knew how to do. Not the fighting, not the absorbing of damage that would have broken other people, not the brute force problem solving that made her effective in emergencies. The honest thing was this, looking at what was broken and fixing it because it needed fixing. Because it was a machine and machines could be repaired. She was replacing the firmware module when Marutin found her. He sat on a conduit housing and watched her work for a while. The apparatus, he said. After Kodo recalibrates it, it will be inert? Permanently, she says. Good. He was quiet. My unit. At Sova Station, there were 11 of us. We tried to do this from the ritual site end, destroy the chamber before Gale could use it. Xena's projection killed 9 of us before we got close enough to attempt the demolition. He paused. We didn't know about the sphere. We didn't know there was a simpler way. Aya kept working. You couldn't have known. No, he looked at his hands. But I've spent 18 months thinking about what we could have done differently. This is what I've spent 18 months doing. He paused. I have also spent a significant portion of that time filing emergency funding requests with the Galactic Patrol Administration, who classify this as a low-priority spiritual matter rather than a universal threat. Bureaucracy, Aya said. Yes, in 11 languages. It's the same in all of them. She almost smiled. How much of the reward money is real? All of it. The Emergency Preservation Fund exists. I have authorization codes. A pause. It will take approximately 30 days to process. 30 days, yes. Aya looked at the firmware module. We still owe 42,000 on the rig. I know. I'm sorry. Don't be. We'd have done it anyway. She put the module back and secured the panel. I'd already hit the man with the wrench. Marutin made a sound that was, she thought, the closest thing he had to a laugh. Yes. I watched that from 40 meters away, and I thought those are the right humans. Is that why you picked us? You were the nearest humans with a ship and relevant capabilities. He paused. But yes, also that. In the 22nd hour aboard the Prophet, Kodo came to find Aya in the maintenance corridor. She was still working. There was always something to work on if you looked. I finished, Kodo said. The sphere, the apparatus. She held out the sphere. It looked different. The iridescence was gone, and the faint pulse that Aya had noticed on the first night. It was just dark material now, opaque and quiet. The resonance signature is gone. I used the sphere as a destructive key. My mother designed it so it could do that as a last resort, burned the calibration out completely. She paused. The sphere is inert now, it's just a keepsake. Aya looked at it. Your mother built in a self-destruct. She built in a final option. Koto closed her hand around it. In case the lock needed to become the key that destroyed the door. She thought of everything. She tried. Koto sat down on the conduit housing where Marutin had been. She looked smaller here, in the ship's functional dark, away from crisis. She looked 19 years old and tired, and a little bit lost, and like someone who had done something necessary, and was now waiting to find out if necessity had been enough. What happens now? We take you home, Aya said. Gale's people will scatter. Some of them will keep believing. That's going to be a longer problem. Marutin's going to have work to do. She paused. But the thing your mother was protecting against, that's done. Kodo was quiet. She never got to know. No, Aya said, but she knew the lock was safe. She made sure of that. She thought about the note, which Koto had read to her the night before. Don't let them have this. She knew you had it. She trusted you to finish it. She didn't know I'd have help. Maybe she figured you would. Smart woman. Kodo looked at her with those enormous earnest eyes that had not, Aya noticed, dimmed even once since she landed in the sand 2 days ago. Can I ask you something? Sure. Are you actually human? Because you're very hard to hurt, and you're very strong, and you've been awake for about 40 hours, and you seem fine. Aya considered this question, which she had been asked in various forms approximately 40 times over the course of her life. Yes, she said. As far as I know. I've had the tests done. Everything comes back human. I'm just a very specific configuration of human. How do you do the things you do? I don't know, Aya said honestly. My father didn't know either. Neither did his mother, apparently. At some point, my family line just became what it is. She turned the wrench over in her hands. My father used to say that the universe does unexpected things with its variables sometimes. That you can run the same process 1,000,000 times, and then the 1,000,001st time something comes out different. She looked at the wrench. He wasn't sure if I was a good different or a bad different. He decided to raise me like I was good and see what happened. Koto was quiet. He sounds like he was a lot like my mother, she said finally. Yeah, Aya said. I think so too. They brought the Prophet back to Vethkaris orbit and spent a day sorting out the situation. Gale. And she still wasn't entirely sure what to make of him, which was probably appropriate for someone in the process of dismantling 12 years of identity, had accepted the evidence with the thoroughness of someone for whom thoroughness was a core trait regardless of direction. He had gone through every document Kodo showed him, asked specific questions, tracked down inconsistencies, and arrived at the conclusion with the same systematic method he'd apparently used to build his operation. He was, she thought, a man who had genuinely wanted to fix the universe. He just picked the wrong framework, the wrong voice in the wrong ancient dark. She wasn't sure what he'd do next. That was his equation to solve. But he had dismissed his crew, formally and without violence, and surrendered the Prophet's navigation systems to Marutan's authentication codes. And when she last saw him, he was sitting in the bow section, surrounded by her mother's research files, reading them for the third time. People, she had learned, were more complicated than machines. Machines had explicable failure modes. People had the kind of failures that came from caring about the wrong things in the right way, and those were harder to fix but also, sometimes, fixable. Marutan filed 17 separate emergency reports with the Galactic Patrol Administration from the Prophet's communications array, which was significantly better than his personal comm unit, and appeared to feel that the sudden availability of a flagship-grade transmitter had meaningfully improved his professional situation. Biesco spent most of the day running diagnostics on the Prophet's systems and writing a maintenance report that nobody had asked for, because Bieko felt that leaving a ship in worse condition than you found it was morally problematic regardless of the circumstances. And Koto sat in the bow section and watched the stars. Aya found her there in the early part of the second evening, when the work was mostly done and the situation had mostly resolved into the shape it was going to hold. She carried 2 cups of the Prophet's coffee, which was, to her considerable surprise, very good. Whoever provisioned this ship liked coffee. They sat together and watched Vethkaris's pale sand far below them and the stars above it. My father will send a ship, Koto said. Probably already has. He'll have tracked the Prophet's transponder. She paused. He's going to lose his mind when he finds out what happened. In a good way or bad way. Mostly good, some bad. She paused. He worries. He's always worried about me. My mother worried too. But her way of worrying was to teach me things. His way is to hire security and build walls. She looked at the sphere, sitting in her palm, inert and dark. I think he's going to have to learn a different way. After this, probably. Will you? She stopped. Started again. When this is over, when you get the reward money, what will you do? Aya thought about the rig, the tortoises, the outstanding debt, the desert and its wrong sand and its particular silences. Pay off what we owe, she said. Keep working. As bounty hunters? It's a living. She shrugged. We're good at it. You could do, Kodo gestured broadly. Anything, if you're I know. Aya looked at the stars. But Biko's happiest when she's building something, and I'm happiest when something needs fixing. The work finds us. She paused. It always finds us. Kodo was quiet for a moment, then, can I come find you after? When this is all organized, and my father is calm, and the Galactic Patrol has written their 50 reports, can I come find you and bring you something? Not as payment, just. She stopped. I want to know how the tortoises are doing. Aya looked at her sideways. We just saved existence. You want to know about the tortoises. I think the tortoises had a really difficult few days, Koto said with complete sincerity. Aya laughed. She had not laughed in a while, not really, not the full thing, and it surprised her. Yes, she said. You can come find us. The tortoises will be fine, they always are. She paused. Bring good coffee. My father has a coffee supplier. I know. Everyone knows. It's probably him. Koto laughed too, and it was the best sound Aya had heard in this whole long, strange set of days, genuine and young and the kind of sound that meant something intact had survived everything that had tried to break it. In the morning, Kotobuki Sincher's escort fleet appeared on the edge of the system. It was a significant fleet. Aya counted 12 ships from the Prophet's observation deck, ranging from fast couriers to a proper military-grade cruiser, all broadcasting the Kotobuki Financial Group's ID. They had apparently mobilized within about 6 hours of losing contact with Koto's last position, which said something about the father. Marutan, on the communications array, had approximately an hour-long conversation with the escort fleet's commander that involved significant amounts of official language and credential verification, and the kind of careful procedural navigation that Aya associated with bureaucracies that had been startled into unusual action and needed everything properly documented before they could proceed. Biko stood at the observation window and watched the fleet assemble in orbit. That's a lot of ships, she said. He worried, Aya said. His way of worrying is impressive. It is. When the reward clears, Biko started. I know. I've been looking at upgrade options for the rig. There's a subsurface mapping array on the Galactic Surplus Exchange that would increase tortoise yields by approximately. I know. And if we pay off the primary debt, the interest rate on the secondary, Biko. Aya looked at her. How much better does the array make the yields? About 40%, maybe 45% with the right configuration. Then get the array. She looked back at the fleet. We're going home. Biko nodded. For her, this was equivalent to a warm smile and a toast. She turned back to her tablet and started configuring something. The transfer took most of the day. Koto was recovered by her father's people with an efficiency that spoke to careful pre-planning. Her father, apparently, had drafted a recovery protocol for exactly this scenario, which said something about how much he'd worried and how specifically. When she came back aboard the Prophet for the last time before the transfer, she had fresh clothes and the slightly dazed expression of someone who had been hugged very hard for a sustained period. She found Aya in the maintenance corridor. He cried, Koto said. Of course he did. He's not supposed to. She stopped, laughed once, helplessly. He cried. And then he wanted me to tell him everything. And I did, and then he cried again. She paused. He wants to meet you, both of you. Properly, he said. She stopped again. What? He said he wants to thank the people who kept her safe. I told him it was mostly you, he said. He said you hit someone with a wrench and then stood back up from getting shot and kept going. She looked at Aya. I told him that was just how you were. Aya was quiet for a moment. What did he say? Koto smiled. He said that's the most human thing he'd ever heard of. Aya turned the wrench over in her hands. Well, she said, he's not wrong. Marutan, in the aftermath, filed for formal recognition of the operation under the Galactic Patrol's emergency action protocols. This involved documentation that ran, by Biko's count, to approximately 800 pages across 4 filing systems in 3 different jurisdictions. It took 26 days to process. When the reward funds cleared, Biko had the figures on her screen before Aya had finished her morning coffee. She said the number out loud in the flat, careful tone she used when math resolved very significantly in their favor. Aya drank her coffee. The array, she said, already ordered. Delivery in 3 weeks. The rig debt, cleared. I cleared it this morning. Everything is handled, Biko said. Everything is handled and we have. She named a remaining figure that was, by any honest accounting, more than they had ever had in their professional lives, and possibly more than either of them had expected to have. Aya looked out at the desert. The sand was doing the thing it did in the early mornings, the flat stillness before the first subsurface current, the particular quality of quiet that she had learned over 3 years to read like text. Nothing wrong with it today. We should get back to work, she said. The season's good for tortoises, Biko agreed. I checked the subsurface charts. There's a cluster about 40 kilometers northeast. I'll get to the skimmer. I already prepped it. Aya stood up and collected her wrench and her goggles. She stood at the rig's platform edge and felt the desert's warmth coming up from the sand and the sun coming down from above and the faint vibration of the rig doing what it was supposed to do. It was, she thought, a good machine. It had been pushed hard and pushed wrong and cobbled together from insufficient resources, and it had done what was needed. It had held. Most things did, she thought, if they were understood well enough and worked hard enough and pointed at what needed to be done. She thought about Kodo somewhere on her father's orbital ablation, explaining to her father why she needed to come back and check on some desert, planet tortoises. She thought about Gale somewhere reading her mother's research for the 4th or 5th time, working out who he was going to be after the architecture of his life had changed. She thought about Marutan filing his last 800 pages of reports in a patrol office somewhere, having taken full credit for the operation in a press release that named neither her nor Biko nor Koto, and deciding this was fine. It meant less trouble, and there was enough trouble. She thought about her father, who had taught her that everything was machines, and machines could be fixed. He hadn't been wrong. He just hadn't said it big enough. Everything was machines, not just engines and apparatuses and subsand cruisers and ritual tools. Beliefs were machines. Organizations were machines. The terrible ancient patience of a dead sorceress was a machine. It had inputs and outputs, and it ran on certain fuels, and you could disrupt it at the resonance stabilizer if you understood it. Gale's faith had been a machine. Her own life was a machine. The thing that happened in her chest when someone scared a scared person was a machine, and machines could be fixed. You just had to understand them well enough and care enough to try. She went down the ramp and across the sand to the skimmer. The desert was quiet and warm, and the tortoises were 40 kilometers northeast, and the world needed fixing, the same way it always did, incrementally and with attention, and without drama where drama wasn't required. She started the engine. It turned over cleanly, which it always did after Biko touched it. She drove. 3 weeks later, Kodo came back exactly as promised. Aya heard the shuttle before she saw it, a clean, expensive sound, nothing like the battered subsurface cruiser that had started all of this. It came down out of a high blue sky, with the unhurried confidence of something with good maintenance records, and landed 200 meters from the rig in a flat patch of sand that had been until very recently occupied by tortoises. The tortoises had moved. They always moved when something came down from the sky, retreating into the subsurface. With the patience of creatures that had outlasted everything, the desert had thrown at them for several million years and intended to outlast this too. Aya climbed down from the rig's upper platform and walked across the sand. Kodo stepped out carrying two things, a case that was clearly insulated, and the dark sphere, which was tucked under her arm with the habitual ease of someone who had been carrying it for a year. "Coffee," she said, lifting the case. "My father's supplier, the one that's probably him. He says he isn't. He absolutely is. He just doesn't want people to think he cares about coffee." She fell into step beside Aya as they walked back toward the rig, and something about the way she moved was different. Less the careful composure of someone who was scared and determined, more the comfortable ease of someone who had found her footing. 3 weeks of being home, Aya thought. 3 weeks of her father knowing she was safe. It showed. "How is he?" Aya asked. "Processing." Kodo made a face that was equal parts affectionate and exasperated. "He read my mother's research, all of it. He'd seen some of it before, but not the detailed documentation on Xena. She paused. He cried again. Then he commissioned a full academic preservation archive for her work. Then he cried again. Then he hired 3 researchers to continue it. He sounds like he knows what to do with grief. He knows what to do with problems, Kodo said. He treats grief like a problem. It's not exactly right, but she thought about it. It's not wrong either. Biko was on the platform when they arrived, running diagnostics on the new subsurface mapping array, which had arrived 14 days ago and had already improved their tortoise yield by 38%, and would, Biko had calculated, hit 45 within the next 2 seasons once she'd tuned the sensitivity thresholds to the specific mineral composition of Vethkara's sand. She looked up at Kodo with the expression she reserved for things she had not planned for and had decided were acceptable. "Yields up," she told Kodo. "I heard. From the patrol report. They put tortoise yields in the patrol report?" Marutin filed a full operational summary. It was very thorough. There were footnotes. Biko considered this. "I have opinions about that." So did the 3 senior administrators who read them. Aya set the coffee case on the supply crate and opened it. The smell that came out was very good, dark and honest, the kind of coffee that tasted like someone had cared about it. She poured 3 cups, and they sat on the crates the way they had sat 3 weeks ago, on a different night, in a different configuration of not quite right circumstances. But the same desert, the same sand, the same pale sky going gold at the edges. Kodo wrapped both hands around her cup and said, "Gale surrendered himself to the Galactic Patrol yesterday." Aya looked at her. He walked into the nearest patrol station with his attorney and a data drive containing a complete documented account of the Order's operations for the past 12 years. Names, locations, funding sources, ritual sites. She paused. All of it. Every member, every sympathizer, every bribed official. She was quiet for a moment. "Marutin says it's the most comprehensive voluntary self-disclosure in patrol history." "Why?" Biko asked. She asked it the way she asked everything, not rhetorically, but actually wanting to understand the mechanism. "Because my mother was right," Kodo said simply, "and he knew it. And the only thing he knew how to do with that was finish the job, dismantle the machine he'd built. He told the patrol he was responsible for everything the Order did, which," her voice shifted, "which is true. He gave the orders. But he also told them about the members who didn't know, who genuinely believed what he'd told them about purification, who had never hurt anyone. He drew the line carefully." She looked at the sphere in her lap. "My mother would have said that was important, that drawing the line carefully was the difference between justice and punishment." "She sounds like she thought about things precisely," Biko said. "She measured everything twice," Koto said and smiled. "Before she cut, they drank coffee, and the desert did its morning things around them. The slow subsurface hum of tortoises beginning their daily migration, the wind off the eastern ridge that came in at this hour and carried the mineral smell of deep sand, the way the light changed every few minutes as the day organized itself." I've been thinking about the apparatus, Biko said after a while. Aya looked at her. Not to rebuild it, Biko said quickly, reading the look. The principles behind it. The resonance calibration system, the way it uses a biological signature to tune to a specific cosmic frequency. It's an elegant mechanism. If you redirected it, not toward ritual sites or vessel preparation, toward navigation. She had her tablet out now, which she'd had out since before Kodo arrived, probably. Deep space navigation. Finding stable routes through sector boundaries that currently require survey ships. You could theoretically use a matched biological resonance pair, two people with complementary signatures, to triangulate through. Biko, Aya said, it's just a thought. Write it down. Biko was already writing it down. She had been writing it down for the past 40 minutes in the background, while running diagnostics, the way she did everything. Simultaneously, in parallel without drama, Kodo was watching her. You're very... She searched for the word. Focused, Biko suggested. I was going to say terrifying, but that's not quite right either. Efficient? Biko said. I am efficient. The terrifying part is a side effect. Kodo laughed, and it was the same sound it had been on the Prophet, genuine and young and intact. Marutan wants to hire you, she said. Both of you, formally. He's rebuilding the patrol's operational division, and he has the emergency preservation fund, and apparently he spent the last 3 weeks in the most productive administrative period of his career because he finally has a flagship-grade communications array, and everything he was waiting to file is now filed and he has budget. She paused. He says he needs people who understand machines from the inside out. His words. Aya thought about it. She thought about the desert and the tortoises and the rig and the new array and the mornings. She thought about Biko's navigation theory and the 45% yield projection. Tell him we'll consider contracts, she said. Specific contracts, not a standing arrangement. He said you'd say that. He's a good analyst. He also said, Kodo glanced at her with an expression that was trying not to be amused. He said to tell you that the Galactic Patrol Emergency Preservation Supplement rate for specialized contractors is... She named a figure. Aya drank her coffee. He's a very good analyst, she said. Biko had stopped writing and was doing math on her tablet with the speed of someone who had already started doing before the sentence was finished. Per contract, she said. Per contract, Kodo confirmed. The silence was the silence of two people letting numbers land in the right places and settle. We keep the rig, Aya said finally. Obviously, Biko agreed. And the tortoises. The tortoise operation is financially self-sustaining now. It can run 2 seasons on the automated array without direct supervision. Then, Aya set down her cup and looked at the sky and thought about the thing that happened in her chest when something needed fixing, and it was in front of her. She thought about 11% odds and a sub-sand cruiser with a missing drive vane and a girl who bounced when she landed. She thought about Marutan's tired eyes and the 800 pages of reports and a man in a gray-painted room reading her mother's truth for the 4th time. She thought about her father who had taught her that everything was machines. One contract, she said. See how it goes. Biko made the sound, the good one. Kodo was smiling openly now, making no effort at composure. He's going to be insufferable about it, she said. He's already drafted the formal offer. He sent it to me to deliver personally because he thought it would be more persuasive. Is that what this is? Aya said. This was a persuasion operation. The coffee is real. The coffee was entirely genuine. I believe you about the coffee. The tortoises were also real. I did actually want to know about the tortoises. Aya looked at her sideways, the earnest eyes, undimmed, exactly as she'd expected. They're fine, she said. They're always fine. They were here before us, and they'll be here after. Kodo looked out at the desert. The sand stretched flat and pale to every horizon, and under it, Aya knew, the subsurface maps were showing 3 clusters of slow-moving tortoises, going about the immense patient business of their lives. I want to ask you something else, Kodo said. My father wants to create a foundation, in my mother's name, funding researchers who work on what she worked on. Universal stability monitoring, early warning systems for large-scale cosmological threats. The kind of thing the patrol does, but with better resources and without the administrative bottleneck. That's a good idea, Biko said, without looking up from her tablet. He wants me to run it, Koto said. I looked at her. I'm 19, Koto said. Your mother built the best lock in existence. She had decades of. She started somewhere, Aya said. Everything starts somewhere. The only question is whether you know what the machine is supposed to do and whether you care enough to learn how to build it. Koto was quiet. She held the inert sphere, her mother's final gift now empty of function and full only of everything it meant. I think she wanted me to do something, Koto said, with what she built. Not just protect it, use it. Build something from it, then build it. I don't know if I know enough, then learn more. Aya shrugged. That's all it is. That's the whole job, always. The morning heat was beginning to build, the particular heavy warmth that Vethkaras did in the late morning, the kind that pressed down on the shoulders and made the distance shimmer. Aya stood up and stretched. You should stay for the yield run this afternoon, she said. Biko's new array is finding clusters 40 kilometers out. First time we've mapped that sector. Koto lit up immediately, fully and without self-consciousness, which Aya had come to understand was just who she was. The tortoises? The tortoises. I want to see them. Then you'll see them. She picked up her wrench and her goggles. Come on. Biko, you're driving. I'm always driving, Biko said, closing her tablet. Because I drive better than you. You do drive better than me, and yet you still try sometimes. Hope springs eternal. They walked down the ramp together, the three of them, into the warm gold morning of the desert, and the sand hissed softly under their boots. And somewhere 40 kilometers northeast, under the surface, the tortoises moved in their ancient steady way, large and unhurried and entirely indifferent to the fact that the universe they lived in had nearly been unmade 3 weeks ago. It hadn't been, and the machines were running, and the yield was up, and the coffee was good, and there was work to do. Which was, Aya thought, approximately everything. She started the skimmer, it turned over cleanly. She drove. The first contract Marutan sent them involved a mining station in the Kelhari belt, where 3 of the patrol's survey ships had gone silent in 4 days. Aya read it on the skimmer during the afternoon yield run, while Bieko drove and Kodo sat in the back and watched the tortoise retrieval arms swing in their practiced arcs. The contract was 2 pages long. The background documentation was 40 pages. Marutan had included a personal note at the bottom that said, in his small, precise handwriting, I have pre-filed the operational reports for probable outcomes A through G. Please try to produce outcome A or B. Outcome F involves significant paperwork. She read it twice. Kelhari belt, she said. I saw, Bieko said, from the front of the skimmer. Mining station. 3 survey ships dark. Could be a lot of things. The patrol thinks it's residual order infrastructure that didn't hear about the surrender yet. Biko was quiet for a moment. The skimmer moved through the heat shimmer of the afternoon desert, smooth over the surface, the new array pinging subsurface contacts at a rate that would have taken them a full day of manual scanning before. Progress. Small and specific and real. The rate they're offering, Bayako said. I know, per day, I know. That's I know, Baiko. Koto had been listening with the polite fiction of not listening. You're going to take it, she said. We're considering it, Aya said. You already said yes in your head. Aya looked at the survey results on the array screen. 40 kilometers of desert, mapped and readable, showing her every tortoise in the subsurface column. Clean data, good information. The kind of clarity that let you act effectively. She thought about 3 survey ships going dark and whatever was in the Kelhari belt, waiting in the silence it had made. She thought about outcome F and Marutan's significant paperwork. Tell him, she said, outcome A or B, we'll do our best. Biko's tablet was already composing the response. The tortoises came up in the late afternoon light, slow and enormous, surfacing in pairs where the mapping array had told them they would be, there and exactly there, the world behaving according to the rules if you understood the rules well enough to ask the right questions. Kodo watched the first one emerge with both hands over her mouth and eyes full of the tears and wonder combination that Aya had decided was just her. Baseline state when something delighted her. The tortoise was about 3 meters long, amber-shelled, and moved with the complete unconcerned dignity of something that had no concept of anyone's plans for it. It regarded the skimmer with one ancient eye and then went back to whatever it had been doing. It's enormous, Kodo said. They're all about that size, Biko said. The subadults run smaller. This is a mature female. How old is she? Best estimate, about 200 years. Kodo was silent for a moment. She was alive before my grandmother was born. Probably before her grandmother, too, Biko said. They're old when they're full grown. They'll be here long after us. Kodo looked at the tortoise. The tortoise, with supreme indifference to the situation, began to graze on the surface vegetation it had emerged to find. That's actually. Kodo started. Stopped. That's really reassuring. Is that weird? That a very old tortoise being completely fine is reassuring? No, Aya said. It makes sense. She watched the tortoise move through the low vegetation with its slow, steady intent. Everything that's survived a long time has survived a lot of things. And it keeps going. That's not nothing. She paused. That's the whole argument. Actually, the whole argument for what? For bothering. She looked at the desert, the golden red distances, the sky going deep above them, for the Kelhari belt, for Marutan's contracts, for your mother's foundation. She looked at Koto. Everything that's still here has earned being here, by surviving whatever tried to stop it. That's worth protecting. Kodo looked at her. You should tell Marutan that. For the recruitment materials. He'd find a way to file it in triplicate. Quadruplicate. He likes thorough, Biko said. From the driver's seat, I'm writing it down. They drove back in the last of the afternoon light, the tortoises in the hold, and the new array pinging steadily, and the horizon doing the thing it did on Veth Karas at this hour, going from gold to deep amber to something that was almost red, not the red of warning, but the red of a sky that had seen everything and was still, somehow, beautiful. The rig was ahead of them, visible from 10 kilometers out, its silhouette familiar against the sky. Her father had built something like it, she thought. Not a tortoise rig, a different machine, in a different desert for different reasons, but the shape of it was the same. A structure built to let you work, to let you find the thing that needed finding and bring it back. She thought about the Kalahari belt, which she had never seen. She thought about the universe, which she had come closer than she preferred to think about to losing. She thought about what Kodo's mother had written, which she had turned over in her mind in the weeks since the girl had read it to her. Don't let them have this. It is the lock, and without the lock the door opens inward, and what comes through won't stop. She had thought, at the time, that it was a note about an object. Now she thought it was a note about a principle. Don't let them have this. Whatever this was, the lock, the machine, the small, intact thing that kept larger things from unraveling. Don't let the patience of ancient and hungry things outlast the attention of the people who understood what was at stake. Stay awake. Stay working. Know your machine. The rig came up around them, and the platform lights came on, automatically, and Biko killed the engine. And the desert went quiet in the specific way it went quiet when the day's work was finished, and the night was beginning its long, mild hold. Aya climbed the ramp. She set the wrench on the workbench where it lived. She had carried it for so long it felt wrong in her hand when she didn't have it, and she put it down with the care she put down things that had been useful. Not carelessly, not reverently, but with the attention of someone who would pick it up again in the morning, which she would. She always did. There was always something that needed fixing. She looked out at the desert in the last light. The sand was quiet and still and exactly right, and the tortoises were in the hold, and the stars were beginning to appear one by one above the eastern ridge. And somewhere out there Marutan was filing outcome of pre-clearance forms in hopeful expectation. She'd try to give him outcome A. She'd always tried. The night was warm and the universe was intact and the machines were running, and in the morning there would be work to do. That, she thought, was enough. That, she thought, was everything. She slept well that night, which was unusual. She was not, as a rule, someone who slept easily. Her mind moved faster than most when it was working, and it was usually working, the same way an engine runs hotter when it's got good fuel. But that night, the desert did its quiet work, and the stars did their patient thing, and the tortoises shifted once in the hold and then settled, and she slept without dreaming of anything except the clean, specific satisfaction of a problem correctly solved. She woke before Biko, which was rare, made coffee, sat at the platform edge with her boots on the ramp and her hands around the cup, and watched the sky go from black to gray to the first pale edge of color. This was the hour, she thought, that her father had loved best. The hour before the day committed to itself. The hour when everything was still possible, and nothing had been complicated yet. He used to sit outside, whatever ship or station they were posted to, and drink his coffee and not say anything. And she had understood even as a child that this was not emptiness, but its opposite. A specific full quality of paying attention to what the moment actually was before the day made its demands. She tried to do the same. The sky got lighter. The sand caught it. She thought about her father for a while, which she didn't do often but did carefully when she did. He had been a careful man. Not cautious. He'd taken risks that made her mother furious on more than one occasion. But careful. He had used that word differently from most people. He meant it in the original sense, full of care, caring about things carefully, making sure the things he cared about were cared for in return. He had cared about the machines. He had cared about the principle behind the machines, which was that the universe ran according to rules you could learn, and that learning them was worthwhile, and that the gap between knowing and doing was the only thing that ever needed closing. He had cared about her. She had not entirely understood, as a child, what it meant to be the kind of different she was. She had broken 3 playground structures by the time she was 6 and bent a pressure door off. Its housing at 9 and by 11 had developed the careful habit of calibrating her own force the way you calibrated an instrument, constantly, with attention, never assuming yesterday's calibration was today's truth. It was exhausting, and then it wasn't, and then it just became the texture of being alive. Her father had watched all of this and said, one afternoon when she was about 12 and had come home from school, with the particular look of a child who has been told again that they are wrong. For existing, the universe does unexpected things with its variables. You are one of those things. What matters is what you do with the variables you have. She had thought at 12 that this was a little abstract. She thought now that it was everything. Biko came out at the second cup, which was the normal time. She had her tablet already and her coffee already calibrated in her mind, which meant she went directly to the cabinet and poured without looking and sat down beside Aya. They didn't say anything for a while. This was also something that had developed over 6 years, the specific comfort of a silence that didn't need filling. It was not the silence of people who had run out of things to say. It was the silence of people who had said the important things and trusted that they would be said again when they needed saying. Kelhari Belt, Biko said finally. Kelhari Belt, Aya agreed. 3-day transit with the Prophet, if Marutan clears the use of it. He will. Biko looked at her tablet. He already has. I got the authorization at 4 this morning. You were awake at 4 this morning. I was calculating the navigation variables for the Kelhari approach. There's an interesting resonance anomaly in Sector 7 of the belt that's been cataloged but not explained. It may be relevant to the missing ships. She paused. It may also be relevant to the navigation theory, the biological resonance navigation. Yes. Aya looked at her. How far along is the theory? Far enough that I want to test a hypothesis. Beiko's voice had the quality it had when something had moved from thought to near certainty and was waiting for confirmation. If I'm right, and the math suggests I'm right, given the Sova station data Kodo archived in the sphere before she burned the calibration, then deep space navigation through unstable sectors becomes functionally different. Not just better, different in kind. How different? Biko told her. Aya listened. It took about 10 minutes. When Biko was done, Aya sat with it for a moment the way you sat with large things that needed room. If that works, she said. When that works, Biko said. When that works, the patrol doesn't need survey ships for the Kelhari anomaly. No, that changes how they operate, significantly. That changes how a lot of things operate. Yes, the sky was fully light now. The desert had gone gold. Aya thought about Kota's mother's research and the lock in the sphere that was now just a keepsake in all the years of work that had gone into understanding the thing that had almost ended everything. She thought about the way understanding propagated. You learned a thing, and the thing you learned had edges that touched other things, and those things had edges too. And eventually what you knew was not just the thing you set out to know, but everything it was connected to. She thought about her father. The universe is machines. Learn the machines. Write it up, she said. The full theory. We'll present it to the patrol when we have the Kelhari data. Already writing. Of course she was. The sun was up now, entirely and without apology, and the desert was doing its morning things, and the tortoises in the hold needed feeding before the transit prep, and there was a checklist of 47 items on the rig before she could hand it to the automated systems for the 2-season run, and Marutan had almost certainly already filed the pre-departure forms and was waiting for acknowledgement. She finished her coffee. She picked up her wrench. She got to work. The universe was a machine, vast and intricate and full of things that broke and needed fixing and full also of the specific human stubbornness that kept showing up with tools and the willingness to understand. She was one of those things. She had always been one of those things. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was, as it turned out, exactly enough.